it's very family orientated. They care about their family, they care about their properties. 96% of Bulgarians own a property. Absolutely unbelievable. They never have to worry about things like that the way we do in the UK. So mental health, physical health, and the other really noteworthy thing is the politicization in the UK has happened over the course of the last 30 years. And I think if you've been living there all that time, it's become normalized because it happens slowly. But when you juxtapose it to a country that doesn't have that politicization, you realize how bad it is in the UK and how unnatural it is. And it's clearly something that they're pushing on us to tribalize us, to another tool to dismantle society, make people unhappy, make people weak physically, mentally. People don't argue about politics in Bulgaria. And one of the things that stands out about talking to them about their history is that many people in the West, for example, people on the right, right-wing intellectuals, for example, Jordan Peterson does it a lot. Their premise is that if you go to the former Soviet Union or here the Soviet bloc, they seem to think that the lesson, the takeaway from having lived through that is that they don't like communism. Now, that's not really true on two counts. One, populations are divided always. Population psychology is that way. So there will always be people that do like the communism. But the other outstanding thing is that I suppose the majority don't, and it isn't communism that they don't like. When you live through communism, you don't learn per se about communism. What you learn is about how power works and how corruption works and how population psychology works. And, can you trust your neighbor according to his personality? Things like that, things that are universal. And I think the people in the West, they seem to think that if you live under communism, you learn about communism. No, you learn many more things. You learn life's universals. You learn the universal things about how people behave in certain circumstances. And I think that's what the UK is going through now. And I think that to put political labels on things and to call something left and something right, and something communist or something fascist, I think is a mistake. Because what you're ultimately dealing with is population psychology and individual psychologies. 9 times out of 10, when you see people arguing about politics, it isn't the politics that's at play. You're dealing with personality types. And what governments do is they weaponize certain personality types. Normally things like the dark triad. So for example, they'll weaponize narcissists and they'll tell them that if you support the government, we'll get our propaganda machine to support you, and then you can live out any kind of narcissistic fantasy about being educated, about being this moral person, and it will be backed up by a propaganda machine. All they have to do in return is support government policy. This is the same thing that they use across the board. They use it in all kinds of regimes. It's nothing peculiar to the UK. It's not peculiar to communism. It's how government agencies interact with their population and weaponize certain personality types. One of the things before I go that I'd like to talk about is I see many people in the UK, understandably, I did the same thing. I left the UK in 1998. And when I did that, I was also under the impression that the bad elements in the UK were peculiar to the UK. The UK is it's a centerpiece in a Western hegemony. So many people make the mistake, in my opinion, it's a mistake. If their intention is to get away from these political issues and these social issues that are happening in the UK, if that's their intention, then I don't recommend that they jump from the UK to Spain, because I lived in Spain for 15 years. I went to a school there before I went to university. I went to university there, did my full degree in Spain, in Salamanca, and then I was trained as a translator in Madrid. I worked as a translator for over 15 years. I speak Spanish, Brazilian Portuguese, and I know that society very, very well. And it's not like any society is very difficult to get to know in a short period of time. You get a lot of people saying things like, well, I know that country because I've been there, or I know someone from that country and so they told me. It really doesn't work that way. Countries are very difficult to get to know. It takes a long time, maybe 10 years or more really. I have lived in Bulgaria now for 6 years, and I can't say I know it that well. It's certainly not like I know Spain. And so the idea that you're going to jump from one node within a hegemony, because they're really economic zones these days. Countries within the West, within that hegemony, are economic zones. So you're going from one economic zone within the West to another one. Now, I spent the summer with Spanish people, young, awake Spanish people. And it is the same, they have the same problems there as they do in the UK. The difference is they are not as far along as we are, but they're on exactly the same path. If you're talking about the type of things that they're teaching at school, are the same types of problems that we have in the UK. But if you go to Spain, you meet some Spanish people, in the same as if you go to the UK, you meet some UK people, you're not necessarily going to be talking to awake Spanish people. Now in Bulgaria, for example, it's not like that at all. Or when we had the pandemic, only 20% of the Bulgarian population took the medical intervention. It's the lowest in Europe. Now, their mainstream media is exactly the same as our mainstream media because it's all centrally controlled. The reason they didn't take any medical intervention, despite the media being the same as ours, is that they are aware that you don't trust government. They don't take a side and say, well, you can trust my side, but not the other side. They know how power works. They know how corruption works. And they know that the people in power are not there for ideological reasons. The ideology comes from dividing people. They are there just to divide. Ultimately, their purpose is power. And people outside the West understand that much better. If you talk to Turkish people about this, if you talk to Bulgarians about this, you talk to Russians about this, you talk to Moroccans about this, they all understand much better how the world works than in my opinion, most Brits. Now, I'm not saying that it's not because Brits are stupid. It's because they were born, like I was, into the most powerful propaganda machine that's ever existed. So the things they believe that aren't true are perfectly understandable. I believed all these things. I believed them, and the propaganda lasts. It's not indelible, but it lasts for me, it lasted decades. It took me decades being outside the UK. So if you can get outside of that Western hegemony, a lot of people going to Asia. I think anywhere that isn't, if your purpose is to get away from these social ills, to get away from this debauchery that's going on in the West, then, and the politicization of everything is so unnatural. And no one deserves to have to live through that. And we don't know what's going to happen in the future, whether it's going to be easy to move. So if you are young, I personally recommend moving. At least have it as a plan B. You know, look into it, have a plan B, have it all set up, do your research. You don't have to act on it, but at the very least, have a plan B. Because everyone I know that's smart, that's aware of what's going on in the world, at the very least, they have a plan B and they discuss it and they talk about it. This idea of staying and fighting, I think it's based on a false premise. I don't think that you have the democracy that you think you have. And I don't think you can stay and fight against the most powerful forces in the world, okay? And as far as I'm concerned, that's not a plan. It's based on a false premise, and stay if you want. It depends on your age, it depends on your personality, but you need at the very least, a plan B. And that's got to be moving away. I like Bulgaria. I've lived in 7 countries. For me, Bulgaria, especially in the current climate that we're in, is the best. Lived in Brazil, lived in Spain, and some other countries, but for me, Bulgaria is the best. You can buy a property in Bulgaria for 10 grand, and it's a good time at the moment. I think for the next few years, it's going to be a good time, because what's happening is the Bulgarians, it's not quite the same as in the UK, where rural properties are quite highly valued in the UK. In Bulgaria, it's not quite the same. They're very beautiful. We have mountains everywhere, fresh water everywhere. But what's happening in Bulgaria is that they're moving out of the countryside to go into the cities because they're looking for work and they want more of the city life. But it means that there's plenty of properties out in Bulgaria that you can get it as a second home. It's only 10 grand. Or if you don't have that money, you can come out, rent, look around, get used to the country, see what you think of it, and then you can look at buying in Bulgaria. And don't get put off by Brexit. There's always a way. Loads of people say, oh, we can't do this because of Brexit. You can do it. People live all over the world. There's always ways of doing things. You just got to look into it and, you know, don't get put off at the first hurdle, because you see people do that all the time. So don't do that. Look into Bulgaria, look into other countries, and please at least have a plan B, because I'm telling you, what's going on in the UK now is only going to get worse. It's not going to get better, and you're not voting your way out of this. Okay? So that's my message from Bulgaria. I'm going to be making some more videos. I've also got a Substack that I use to be able to talk about things in more detail, because you can't talk about everything on this platform. The Substack is Simon Noxon at Substack, and the account is Spiritual Psyop. Okay, thanks for listening. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll be back with videos this week.